This is your nightly roundup of sports, stories of adaptability, and stories that should be trending but quite frankly aren't. Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Well, I realize 6 is a great number around here. We started Alex at 6, and we had 6 influential women on for International Women's Day. And I get a sixth sense about this next topic because I feel like it's not being fleshed out enough. You know, I talked about it earlier in the week, Governor Hochul instituting the National Guard in our subways. But there's more to it. It's not just those armed up, 1,000 of them, guardsmen, state and MTA cops, in addition to the usual, transit patrol officers. But these guys have their big guns ablazing. Should something happen, they're checking bags and whatnot. But there's a more interesting part of this law, which Kathy Hochul has enacted, that I want to turn your attention to. This law now allows judges to ban transit assault perps from trains and buses. Now that's a plus. As scary as it might look to have all these armed guards and National Guardsmen, state and MTA cops, the underlying law to allow judges to ban transit assault perps from trains and buses is great. The only question is, can we trust these judges to enact such a ban? Because we all know they like letting these guys out on the street with, an ankle bracelet monitoring. It's so stupid. We'll get to the bail reform in a minute. But I like what Governor Kathy Hochul has done here. You might have your thoughts on the 1,000 National Guardsmen coming down to our subways and checking bags and being all proactive, something we haven't seen since 9/11, post 9/11. But the law to allow judges to ban transit assault perps from trains and buses, I'm all for that. There's also more coordination between the NYPD and district attorneys to thwart recidivists who continually do these acts of violence and assault on the trains. Of course, another thing is, will the DA, specifically Manhattan DA, act any kind of law on assaulters? Or is he going to let them out on misdemeanor charges like he does everybody else? And then they're developing $20 million to expand subway co-response outreach mental health teams. Now, the thing with the mental health outreach is it's very tough to get an EDP, emotionally disturbed person, off the subways because they don't want help. That's why they're in the subways to begin with. They do not want help. But I digress. I think to try and expand the outreach might be a great use of money. I don't know. Then the other thing is get ready for cameras hitting our train cars and conductor cabins. Of course, we're seeing the MTA have some slashings in the conductor's cabin. We're seeing passengers, a little bit of shoving still going on in the city. So I like the CCTV. You might think it's overbearing, but we need it for the time being anyway. So get ready for that. Now, this all ties into the state of crime in New York City because you've got this three-pronged assault. You have the open borders, the open courtrooms where they're just letting people back out on the street on bail reform. And Governor Hochul has no choice but to do this. I truly believe that. The other pronged assault is that you've got DAs like Manhattan Attorney Alvin Bragg, who doesn't want to prosecute to the point where an Arizona judge is still holding someone that committed a crime here in Soho in Arizona jurisdiction because she's going to do what he won't. Isn't that sad? An Arizona judge knows better than a New York City district attorney about a New York City crime. But I wanted to look into what bail reform exactly was because that's such a hot button topic. It's a most talked about topic. And the weekending edition of the Alex at 6 feature and Alex Garrett Podcasting feature, I just want to highlight, the NYCLU, Civil Liberties, is actually saying rollbacks to bail reform would be horrible, meaning more bail reform. Well, when you look at this perfect storm of Alvin Bragg making, I believe, 54% of felonies misdemeanors, combine that with no bail being applied to those who are freed on misdemeanors as well as nonviolent crimes. These idiots at the NYCLU and at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office don't understand that you lowering a felony to a misdemeanor and then the misdemeanor counting toward a bail reform will lead to someone who thinks they have no consequences to them to really act in a harmful, fatal way in New York. So if you didn't know what bail reform was until now, I hope I gave you a little lesson. That apparently, according to NYCLU and other laws, that we are dealing with a city that lowers felonies to misdemeanors, 54% of crimes, including, get this, you know this by now, armed robbery is a misdemeanor. Then these guys are let out on bail, without bail, back on the street. I think it is a mix for disaster. So that's the three-pronged assault. The lowering of felony to misdemeanor, and then the judges being free to let out anybody they want at their discretion based on the act. And a real crime, a real murder could happen. And like we saw with that cello slashing, the slasher was let back out. And do you know what happened with that? She was arrested for shoplifting, I believe, at Nordstrom's. Okay? So this bail reform, this open border, and what was the three-pronged? And then the discretion of the DA and the judges. What a three-pronged assault on the city of New York and other cities that are going through the same crap. And maybe now you have a better idea, because we all hear the term bail reform in daily life. We just don't know maybe exactly what it is. And for the advocates that want to roll back, that don't want to roll back bail reform, that want to intensify bail reform, you don't know what you're talking about, because you don't understand Alvin Bragg is lessening. Oh, wait, maybe you do. Maybe you elected Bragg because you knew that he would do all this havoc on the city by categorizing 54% of felonies as misdemeanors when they really should be felonies, and some of these jailbirds should be behind bars. Governor Hochul, I applaud you for stepping up what our city is not doing. But I also implore you, get Alvin Bragg out of office. It's almost like Biden deploying hundreds of troops at the border instead of closing the border. Deal with the situation. Just deal with it. Don't just employ troops, but actually act on this. Don't just say, oh, we have a problem with the border, so we're going to deploy troops down there. Well, you, President Biden, have the authority to do more on border, but you are pushed by the far left. And that's saying enough. These open borders need to be closed. You have the power to do that. Do I agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene and even Sid Rosenberg, dare I say, yelling out in the State of the Union the other night? Not really, although I guess you got Biden to say Laken Riley's name, though wrong. I don't know. I thought it was a pretty energetic State of the Union, but it missed the point. The reason why Republicans won't vote on a bill to close the border is because there's tons of other things attached. Why can't the border funding be a separate bill, Democrats? Why can't that be a separate bill? And Governor Hochul, I applaud you for this, for deploying troops at a time where we need them in our subways. But you could do more, and you could fire that useless Alvin Bragg, DA of our city. Because here's one of the stipulations. NYPD and DAs coordinate to thwart recidivists. Good luck with that. Manhattan, they love recidivists. They want crime to keep coming up. They want havoc in the name of social justice. This is a dangerous three-pronged assault on our city. And we can deploy all the troops we want. But if we don't correct the fundamentals of closing a border, of closing bail reform loopholes, of recategorizing felonies as felonies, then those who deploy the troops, when they have so much more they could do, are also missing the point. And the point is not to scare the world of New York City by having more armed guards. We want to live in a society that's free, not armed up and just always patrolling us. Who wants to live in that kind of state of fear that we lived under post 9/11? No, you want to make a free and open society? You close the border. Ironic, right? And you close the bail reform loopholes, and you close down courtrooms that are allowing judges to, at their discretion, let someone back out on the street. The woman that slashed the cellist should have no business being back on the streets. But apparently the judge was appointed by a left-wing group or endorsed by a left-wing group. There's some activism there. These judges are being brought in to the fold by extremists. And that's why it's becoming an extreme kind of city when it comes to the 1,000 National Guard deployed. And I think you want to really close up crime, you get rid of Alvin Bragg as a big start. Big start. I love reserving the one leg up feature for just feel-good stories, and I love having this Alex at 6 because I get to unwind with you and vent about everything that's going wrong that could be going right. And maybe if someone spoke up here in the city and said, troops are not needed when we have the laws applied applicably and correctly and not changed for social justice. And even the NYCLU needs to realize that they are contributing to this disaster by advocating for less bail reform rollbacks and more bail reform. Because that's just not reforming, that's making us worse. It's amazing. Progressive really means regressive in the big scheme of things. And I don't think we as New Yorkers, New Jerseyans, Connecticutans, Tri-Staters that utilize the city should stand for it. So I'll keep talking about it. You want to deploy troops? Fine, but that's only a temporary fix. You get rid of the problem. You close the border. And you have the power and should not act with fear when it comes to governing or becoming a president. Stop fearing those activists that might not vote you back in. Who cares? You're doing what's right for the country. And in this case, the right for the city of New York by kicking out Alvin Bragg once and for all. By closing that border once and for all. Troops are only a stopgap measure, not a permanence. And I hope these leaders realize that on the Alex Garrett Podcast Network.